Jury deliberations have just wrapped for the day in the historic trial of former President Donald Trump. There was activity a short bit ago when the jurors asked for clarity on jury instructions, as well as some witness testimony from David Pecker and from Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen. Jury deliberations come after a marathon 5 weeks of testimony from more than 20 witnesses, with prosecutors saying they've shown plenty of evidence to prove that Trump was at the center of a conspiracy and cover-up to falsify documents to pay Stormy Daniels and hide their alleged affair from voters. But the defense argued there was no conspiracy to influence the 2016 election and that Trump did nothing wrong. Let's bring ABC News' Rena Roy, who is outside the courthouse, senior reporter Catherine Falders, and criminal defense attorney and former federal prosecutor Tim Jansen. Rena, I'll go to you first. Jury deliberated for about 4.5 hours today. They'll be back in court tomorrow morning. What stood out to you?
Well, look, Elizabeth, we really didn't hear much until about 3.5 hours or so in. That is when we heard that the jury sent the first note. And that first note, as you mentioned, was really asking for different parts of testimony, 4 different items of testimony. And 3 of those items were related to David Pecker. Now, you'll remember that he is a former National Enquirer publisher, and his testimony, he said that he was really the eyes and ears of the Trump campaign. So the jury is clearly focused on that. They also asked to hear a part of Michael Cohen's testimony when he was talking about the meeting at Trump Tower. So we did get a little bit of intel into what the jury really seems to be focusing on at this hour. And then, of course, that second note went to the judge. They are asking to rehear the jury instructions. As we know, those instructions, they were pretty lengthy. The judge took about an hour to go through them. So really interesting to hear those notes.
Right. Well, and Catherine, what do you make of the jurors asking for the instructions to be reread, asking for parts of that testimony to be reread? How significant is that? Obviously, hard to know exactly what's going through the jurors' minds, but what do you make of that? And what do we know was the reaction from inside the courtroom?
Yeah, I think the specifics of the testimony they're requesting are significant, Elizabeth, because in part, they want transcripts or portions of the transcripts of that 2015 meeting at Trump Tower between Cohen, David Pecker, Donald Trump, allegedly. That's where prosecutors allege that this scheme to catch and kill was allegedly hatched. So they appear to be, and again, it's a fool's errand, as a lot of us have said, determining what really the jury is thinking here, but they appear to be assessing the credibility of multiple witnesses, Michael Cohen, David Pecker, what they said as it relates to very important portions of what prosecutors are alleging here. Now, that was the first note. The second note is that the jury wants all of the jury instructions reread, which will be quite time-consuming if the judge has to read those in full again. That took the better part of 90 minutes, Elizabeth. So he said he'll address that tomorrow. But what's happening in court right now, at least, are Trump's lawyers and the prosecutors are going back and forth through all of these transcripts that the jury has requested, the portion of the transcripts. They have to go pull out the relevant pieces of those. And once they do that and agree on it, then they have to tell the judge. The judge will then read back, if you will, those portions of the transcripts to the jury. The prosecutors are estimating that's probably going to take about 30 minutes, the readbacks, once the judge starts doing that, which is expected tomorrow.
So rehashing that tomorrow. Tim, what does it say to you as far as the portions of testimony that they're requesting? How does that relate to the charges that Trump is facing when it comes to falsifying those business records and the alleged cover-up?
Well, it looks like they could be going chronologically back to the inception of the so-called conspiracy. They're going back to the hotel, the lobby, and the meeting that took place in Trump Tower. That's what the prosecution alleges the conspiracy started. And then I think they wanted to see that testimony and then the language of and testimony of David Pecker. But I can tell you, as a longtime trial lawyer, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Right? When you think you know what that jury is questioning, you may be wrong. You're more likely wrong. And it could be that one juror has a different perspective than 11 others. And they're going to read it and show it to that juror and convince him. Or it could be 2 or 3 jurors that don't believe it and they want to hear it again. And it's not a surprise they want to hear the instructions again. The instructions were very convoluted, very vague, and for non-lawyers, it's very cumbersome to understand what they're actually supposed to be doing back there.
Well, yeah, Tim, is it pretty typical that we would hear jurors ask for the instructions to be reread or ask for testimony to be reheard? Is that normal in a case like this?
Well, this case is not normal, but I can tell you in most cases, sometimes complex cases, not like this typical drug case, but our murder case. But in crucial testimony, a lot of time expert testimony wants to be read back because it's very complex. And you can describe this as a complex case. So it's not abnormal to want to hear testimony and jury instructions, not at all.
As you say, though, this case not normal in any way. Rena, give us a little bit of insight into how we know the former president was reacting during today's proceedings in court.
Well, look, earlier in the day, he kind of had his usual demeanor of being slumped over in the chair, at some points even closing his eyes. But notably, as he left court today, he looked angry. He was scowling. But at some point, he even gave an exaggerated fist pump to the camera. So it kind of ran the gamut today. We do know that all day he was posting on social media, really slamming the trial, the charges, the judge. So kind of more of the same. But yeah, notably pretty angry as he walked out today.
And Catherine, what can you tell us about how the Trump team is looking at where this goes from here, how they're looking at the jury deliberations, the timeline for this? Give us a little bit of insight from your own reporting there.
Yeah, look, it's so hard to tell, but if you're a lawyer on Trump's defense team, at least from sources close to the defense that I've been speaking to, look, they view the longer the jury deliberates, the better for them. They surely don't think that Trump will be found not guilty on all of these charges. That is wishful thinking, if you will, on their end, but they're hoping for a hung jury here, potentially. There's lots of different outcomes, lots of different ways this can go. There was 34 counts. He could be found not guilty on some, guilty on the other. Regardless, if he is found guilty on any of these, the Trump team certainly will appeal. But in their minds, the longer the jury deliberates, say this goes into next week, say they have additional questions, Trump's lawyers do think that that maybe bodes well for their client. Again, all of this is so unpredictable and hard to tell, but at least that's what they're thinking.
When you're thinking about one of what could be the many outcomes, Tim, how are you looking at the difference that would be reasonable doubt and unreasonable doubt, especially just given the really, frankly, unprecedented nature of the defendant here, the former president?
Well, you know, we give definitions of reasonable doubt, but we really don't give a sound definition of reasonable doubt. It's like depending on your most important act that you would do, do you feel comfortable making that decision with the information you have? So if an example, if you were going to have brain surgery, and do you believe by a reasonable doubt that you would act on that with the evidence in this case? And it's not easy to decide. And sometimes people know it, and jurors know it when they see it. I mean, they clearly see the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt the person do it. They come back guilty. And the jury is going to say, well, you know, they have it. I'm not sure. Then they know they don't have a burden of proof hasn't been met. So jurors, for the most part, do their civic duty and try to get it right. But this case is completely different than any case I've ever seen. And it's for the whole country. No one's seen a case like this.
No doubt about that. Catherine, who was with Trump in court today? I know some of his family. We've every day been making a show, the former president making this his campaign as far as who shows up and stands by him as these proceedings are going on.
Yeah, yesterday was a stronger show of force as it related to Trump's family. Of course, that's because Todd Blanche in his closing arguments was making the case that Trump was a family man as well. No better people to have behind Donald Trump in the front row than his family. Today, a little bit of a thinner crowd and audience and entourage with him. That's not surprising. They only had to read the jury instructions, and then Trump was going to sit in his room for the rest of the day while the jury deliberated here. But we did see one of his top campaign aides, Susie Wiles, I believe, in the courtroom. She hasn't made many appearances, so that was a rare appearance. And then, of course, some members of his family as well. But gone are the days, I believe, now I don't want to jinx myself here, but gone are the days that we see all of these members of Congress there standing behind him in this show of force, if you will. His political opponents here, his biggest supporters, frankly, Elizabeth, on Capitol Hill. And it's also turned into this whole trial, Elizabeth, almost this audition for whether it be VP, whether it be his endorsement, his support. You've just cycled these supporters in and out of that courthouse, and then they've gone outside and done the rounds on TV. So we're not seeing much of that anymore. That's expected, given that this is winding down, and there's not much action inside the courtroom anymore, of course, as there was before.
And of course, the former president also fundraising off of every moment of this, too. Rena, just give us a sense, where is Trump right now? Is he still in the courthouse? And what's next here now that we know that they'll be facing this rereading tomorrow, the instructions and those portions of testimony?
Right. Well, we know that Trump walked out again with that scowl on his face. And as for what's next, the jury did leave for the day. They'll be back tomorrow morning at 9:30. And it's up to the jury, right, how long this ends up lasting. We do know that even at the end of the day today, as the judge was talking, they did seem really engaged in what he was saying. And he took that time to remind them and stress that they cannot look up anything about this trial, saying that they are really at a critical point in these proceedings.
A critical point that we will continue to cover every twist and turn. Rena, Catherine, and Tim, thank you all so much.